grateful that you could accommodate recording in progress. Grateful that you could, accommodate my schedule. So let me just give you a few opening remarks and then we can get right to your questions. So we have some new protest activity on campus. It's very much an evolving situation. But I've also heard, and I want to express my care and concern to you and the Vanguard staff. As I understand, you've been receiving some harassing messages on social media from that individual who drove their car into the protest earlier this month. How are you doing?
Yeah, we are we are handling it. We had a safety meeting this morning and we're trying to learn how to cope with a threat like that, but I appreciate the comment. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to assure you that PSU has your back, and CPSO and the Dean of Student Life and their office is taking the threat seriously, very seriously. If there's anything I can do to help you to feel safe while you're doing your job as student journalists, please feel free to reach out or let me know. Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So spring term has been really challenging for our campus community. But I'm hopeful that we can come through this as a stronger Portland State University. I'm going to continue to defend the rights of expression for those who are raising their voices against the injustice and the war in Gaza. The killing of innocents. It's really, truly horrific. I'm engaged in conversations with ASPSU and other student groups on the topic of the resolution that was passed by student government regarding PSU's involvement with Boeing. In fact, also engaged with Boeing and with the foundation, for that matter, talking about our ties with Boeing and what that means. So just to back up a little bit about, the background as I think through it, I first learned about the student concerns about our ties with Boeing when ASPSU spoke about it during a Board of Trustees meeting, which was in October. And following that, I met with ASPSU to discuss the matter and disclosed to them at that point that PSU doesn't actually have any investments in Boeing. And then, so that kind of changed the conversation a little bit. And then later, ASPSU amended their resolution to say cut ties rather than divest. Cut ties completely with Boeing. And so that's the topic I'm remaining in conversation with them about today, even to this day. So no other student group at that time asked to meet with me or submitted any demands for my consideration before a letter was delivered to my office in April. It was then that I decided to pause our Boeing relationship in order to make space for further conversation, debate, and investigation of the topic. So I want you to know that I'm listening. I know this is an important issue for the students. Still working on how the debate will go forward. And unfortunately don't yet have updates to share on that. But it's my hope that we can close out the spring term in a way that celebrates the accomplishments of our students. They've worked so hard and are about to graduate, and they and their families deserve a great celebration. Of course, I'm also hoping for an end to the war in Gaza and for return of hostages and an end to the violence and peace and justice to prevail in that region. So that's sort of the opening statement. I'm happy to take questions now.
Jumping right into it. Thank you. Yeah, so we received over 100 questions through an online survey. Obviously, most of them revolve the recent protests on campus. And the ones selected have been reworded as necessary.
Okay.
So jumping right in, the night before the police came to clear the library, An
Mhm.
email went out saying that campus would not be, that it would be open the next day.
Mhm.
Though police arrived on campus around 6 a.m., campus was not officially closed until 7 a.m. Can you take me through your thought process that Wednesday evening on reopening campus when at the time protesters were still in the library and police had yet to clear the premises?
Yeah, so uh, let me be clear that on Monday evening, we at that press conference that we held, that I held with, or that was held at the um, Justice Center, was with the mayor and the chief of police and the DA and myself. At that point, we announced that I was giving operational control of the library situation to the Portland Police Bureau. And, once they took operational control for clearing the library, we were a bit in the dark about exactly when or how that would be done. So basically, we didn't know that it was going to happen at the time that it was going to happen. And so we had waited a couple of days, and then we thought, okay, it seems like things were safe enough when the police were not actively involved that we could have campus open and classes. And it was only later that we learned that, oh, okay, today's the day. So, you know, that accounts for the, turnaround. Had they not been coming, then we would have held classes because, we were like, we can't wait forever. We have to start up classes again. So it was a little bit of a stop and start situation there.
So is it safe to surmise then that once you handed control over to the Portland Police Bureau, there was no forewarning from them on at what point they would be coming to the library?
Well, I would not say there was no forewarning, but it was short notice.
Short as in morning of?
Yeah, I'm not going to respond to exactly when. I don't want to, reveal any of their tactical secrets or anything like that.
Sure.
It's really important to me that we maintain a great relationship with the Portland Police Bureau. And they have to, in order to keep themselves and the city safe, they have to, keep an element of tactical surprise or, secrecy on that.
Sure. I suppose the only reason I ask is because as a student, I've covered campus openings before, and I noticed that on day of closures, the campus will close at 6:04
Mhm.
in the morning. But the alert didn't go out until 7 a.m., although police were on the premises starting just before 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So why not send the notification out at 6 a.m. when they were on campus at that time?
Yeah. Um, I'm not real sure exactly what the thinking was, but we we also didn't know exactly how it would happen and how much. So I think by 7 a.m., what we realized is, oh, they're cordoning off the whole area around, and it was a very large area. So they were going to be in control of a large area of the campus. And that's when we realized, okay, we can't just isolate that safely. We also started to think about you know, what exactly is going to be the response of the community? Because if the community had just been going to ignore the whole thing, then, but we already saw people gathering and so forth. So then we thought, okay, that in itself is going to create, and in fact, it did create the biggest danger of all to the community as the, gathering of the protesters and that sort of thing, rather than the clearing of the library.
The protesters, the gathering of the protesters provided the most danger to the community.
Well, at that particular moment, more than the clearing of the library, yes.
I see. Thank you. So on the second question, you mentioned that you're continuing that conversation with students to not divest, but to cut ties with Boeing. Is the forum that you've mentioned in prior emails, is there a date for that to be scheduled that students can anticipate?
So, we're still trying to get the exact people involved to commit to a particular date. So we haven't been able to announce that yet, but we'll make sure that you're aware as soon as that happens.
Thank you. So on May 2nd, the Portland Police Bureau officers, as well as Oregon state troopers, prevented members of the press and legal observers from witnessing police activity and arrests. Do you condone the obstruction of legal observers by police?
Let's see. Just looking up my timeline here.
Sure.
So, exactly where and are you talking about? Yeah, so perhaps you're talking about the alert that said avoid the area.
So around, I'm unsure without looking at the timeline myself of the exact time. But after that 7 a.m. marker, police at a certain point expanded the perimeter, as you mentioned, already taking up a large portion of the blocks. They expanded it further, which as a member of the press made it incredibly
I see.
to see. And
yeah, so the way I understood it, we were kind of getting reports about what was happening in the situation, and we had limited visibility into it, and and the police had limited visibility, so they weren't sure how quickly they could get in, how much obstruction there was to remove from all of the doors and exits and entrances. And that, I believe, was taking longer than they thought. And so that created a bigger situation than they initially thought. So I think that's why they expanded that. I don't think it was aimed in any way at the press, but I can see how that was a side effect of what they were doing.
Right. Sorry, press and other legal observers there as well.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, moving on with these questions due to our short amount of time.
Yeah.
So there are reports and photo evidence of at least one protester who became severely bruised after an officer reached under her shirt and grabbed her chest. This is one example of the violence that students experienced at the hand of the Portland Police Bureau on campus. Given your decision to call in the PPB to the library occupation, do you have any remarks for members of the PSU community who feel endangered by the continued police presence on campus?
Yeah, so we have heard rumors about an assault, but to be clear, nothing's been filed with the PSU Office of Equity and Compliance, which is part of the Global Diversity and Inclusion. Despite that, because I did hear a rumor of this, we have already put them on, asked our Title IX coordinator to, or instructed our Title IX coordinator to begin trying to, I won't say investigate, but trying to find out whether there's some evidence, some information, whether somebody has made a complaint to anyone, and whether we could follow that up. So that's we're still trying to reach out to get more information about that. We're reaching out to the Women's Resource Center to see if we could generate or have a complaint, because until we do, we can't really fully investigate that claim. So that's just to answer the issue, or to respond to the issue about that. As for the issue about bringing the police onto campus, I frankly think that the situation in the library, what happened in the library was so incredibly dangerous and egregious that it absolutely necessitated that I take some action to clear the library. And there was I was basically given no other option other than to we tried negotiating, we tried asking people to leave, and it was a very unsafe situation. For one thing, there was it was fire danger, and for another thing, it was a resource that was taken offline for all of our other students who wanted to use it. So I think in this case, and I was, it was not an ideal situation. It's certainly not something that I ever imagined when I came to PSU a year ago that I would be doing this, but it was necessary, I think, all in to maintain as much safety as possible on campus. And I frankly think that yes, it was a risk, but the outcome was on the whole quite good. That is, we were able to safely clear the library without any injuries to anyone in the clearing of the library, at least. This rumor complaint, which again, we haven't been able to investigate, but notwithstanding, and that was not part of the clearing of the library, but rather of the subsequent protest.
Sure, thank you. So going to the damages in the library then, several students have expressed wanting to see an itemized list. Will students be able to see that list? And if so, is there an estimated date on that?
Well, what we have is an estimate of the cost of the damage, which at this point is $750,000 to just clean up, remove all the graffiti, remove all the paint from the floor, from the wood surfaces, from other kinds of surfaces. There are many, many pictures of that. There are pictures that have been, are out in the press. Many of us have pictures all over our cell phones and so forth. It's an itemized list of the graffiti and so forth would be kind of hard to imagine. Beyond that, there's also a lot of furniture was broken in the barricading and just mayhem that was going on, and there was also a lot of technology that was broken and so forth. I'm sure that eventually there will be a complete accounting of what has to be purchased for that. Also of what services had to be outsourced, for example, to clean the windows on the outside, which required specialized equipment to go up to those high spaces. The power washing that was done by a specialized graffiti cleaning service. And then, repairing some of the wood that's been damaged has to be removed, and then new. And I don't know how they even are going to clean the brick walls on the inside that were graffitis. So, I mean, the last time I was in there, when I was in there on Wednesday with the media, it was still, those surfaces were still not clean. So, whether there will be an itemized list that will be available, I'm not sure, but it is clear that I think from all of the photos and the access that many journalists have had, very clear that that's a pretty reasonable estimate, if not even a low estimate of what it would take to clean that up. Of course, we've got a lot of these services that can be done by our facilities management people during the normal course of their day, but that means that other places are not getting cleaned up that would normally be getting cleaned up.
Sure, and that estimate is still to change, increase or decrease by about 125,000. Is that correct?
So I've heard different things. 750 was, yeah, that's right. Jason Franklin had said it could be $100,000 one way or the other on the 750. And then I've heard that the technology will probably take it to $1 million, but again, that's not complete yet.
Right, sure. Thank you. So, given the increase in student protests across the world, I want to take a step back for a moment um, and hear about your experience when you were a student during the South African anti-apartheid demonstrations on college campuses when you were
Mhm.
attending university.
Mhm.
How did you feel as a student during that time?
Yeah. So yeah, South Africa was a pretty horrible apartheid situation. And I was certainly all in favor of toppling that government. And was elated, followed the travails of the ANC and Nelson Mandela, and he's certainly a great hero in the history of the world. Um, and I remember when I was a student, there was a day of fasting. That's one of the things that we did. We fasted for a day and then contributed the money that we would have spent on food that day towards helping folks in South Africa. And I felt it was a really good cause, a really important cause for us. As I recall, there were so many sanctions on South Africa at the time that it was basically being considered a world pariah by the entire United Nations. It was not part of the United Nations. It was also not permitted to participate in the Olympics. So it was already an outsider from the world of nations, and that seemed to me to be quite appropriate.
Interesting. So can you speak a little bit then about, with considering your experience, the differences and similarities you see between those protests and the ones happening now on your campus today as university president?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so those protests were, I mean, I don't remember anywhere near this kind of violence or vehemence, but they certainly were, you know, uh, justified in the sense of, yeah, they weren't as targeted, you know. I don't even remember who. Yeah, they didn't seem to be quite as targeted at particular companies or particular people, leaders, or anything like that, other than the South African situation. The other thing about it is, in that case, there was one clear oppressor group and one clear, repressive government, right? Um, in this situation, you have multiple different crimes against humanity going on, and different groups with different perspectives. The Israeli government, whatever you think about it, in terms of its conduct of the war or the occupation, is still, a recognized member of the world community, not a pariah in the way that the South African government was. Now, it may get to that point, and certainly there's a very reasonable argument for the claim, or there is an argument for the claim that the crimes against humanity are being committed in the disproportionate nature of the war. On the other hand, I think that the world opinion is, generally speaking, most countries probably recognize the right to exist of the state of Israel and the right to defend itself against terrorism, which of course was what occurred on October 7th. Not to equate the two, certainly in terms of lives, but it's not quite as clear, and there are arguments on many sides for different points of view, in a way that didn't exist in the situation with South Africa. Only the white South Africans thought that that was a good idea.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. So taking it back now to our campus community, students have expressed concern regarding the frequent use of the emergency alert system, saying that they have caused high levels of panic and anxiety, given that some of these alerts went out unnecessarily. For example, alerts stating a police presence on campus when to people there was none. Are there plans in place to clarify the use of these alerts to mitigate unnecessary fear?
So I think the one that you're talking about was a May 10th alert of an otherwise peaceful protest that was actually referencing, although people might not have known this, an attempted occupation of another building, the Park Mill building. So it was necessary for people to be alerted that in that area, there was a police presence. So I think that was important. There's also another issue, a problem with that we are now trying to fix with the alert system, where it was going out on multiple channels, even though people might have only opted into one or two of those. So it was going on email, phone, and chat, text, right? And I was getting all three, certainly. And that does seem like possibly overkill. And we have given people the opt-in to choose how they want to be. And we had the system set up so that whether you opted into one or all three, it was going to all three. We've fixed that now. We noticed that problem, so it should be a little bit less. But I think that each particular text alert or each particular alert was necessary and warranted at the time. It is unfortunate that once you have this kind of alert system, people are, well, I don't know that this is unfortunate. The whole point is for people to feel like they're being alerted. But once you have this system, then you really need to, every time there's a specific kind of event that you do send an alert for, you have to be consistent and always do that. And so we have very careful protocols in place for how we word those and how we send them out. And I think we've done a good job actually of following that protocol this time around.
Sure. So just to be clear, the example that I mentioned specifically references an incident actually on May 1st, when one of those alerts went out and police were said to be at the South Park blocks, but no police were at the South Park blocks.
Ah, right. No, they were, so that report was about damage that was being done to the CPSO building and a few other buildings in the area, some broken windows and things like that.
I see. So are there any plans you're working on implementing to mitigate the library or any other PSU building from being damaged again during protests in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. We are constantly scenario planning and watching, all the different channels of social media to try to predict what's happening next. So we are, trying to stay on alert when it comes to that and prevent things from escalating, while at the same time making sure that we, allow for peaceful protest and, stand back as much as possible to allow people to express themselves and not feel intimidated by the presence of police. So that's a delicate line, but that's I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the way we're trying to mitigate the dangers. And I'm sorry, I have to go now to my next meeting, which is off campus.